Hi, welcome to Breakthrough Ideas in Training webinar series. I am Cordell Riley, President and founder of Turtle Training. It's my pleasure to be your host for this particular session. It's also my pleasure to introduce our guest of honor today. Evan Hackel is on with us. Evan is the founder and co-owner of Engage Consulting. Evan, welcome.
Great to be here, Cordell.
Super, super. Today, our focus is going to be on training ROI, so training return on investment. So you spend a lot of effort, making training available and getting it out there, but we're really going to focus on how do you get the return on investment that you put in training. So Evan, I certainly have had the pleasure of working with you for several years, so I know a lot about your background. I know obviously that your family, owns small businesses. I know that you spent much of your professional career as a franchisor. A lot of that in a turnaround role. I know that you've invested in several businesses, and collectively you and I are working on several different initiatives together. So I know a lot about you, but I'd love to have our audience get to have the pleasure as well. So can you just share a little bit more about your background and what you've done over your career?
Sure, I'd be happy to. My background really has been all related to small businesses and franchising. I started out a small video rental franchise business in the 80s. I've started 3 different franchise businesses. You alluded to turnarounds. In 2000, I took over the running of a bankrupt franchise with about $700 million in system-wide sales and turned it around to about $2 billion. I've run a $3.5 billion system in 3.5 countries, 3.5 countries, in 3.5 billion in 4 countries.
Yeah.
And I've had an opportunity to work in a lot of different fields, including mortgages, tuxedos, lighting, floor covering in my business career. But since I've been consulting and since I've been part of Turtle Training, I've had an opportunity to work with lots of different companies in lots of different areas. One of my personal passions, and that's really what I'm about, so when you ask, who are you, what you've done, I kind of gave that, is engagement. And it's getting people to be inspired and getting people to work together and getting people to utilize tools like training. And you can build the greatest training in the world. If no one ever takes it, did you really build it? And that's, to me, my passion. And what I want to really talk about here is how do you get more use? Because if you can increase use, you're going to improve ROI. So that's me.
Yeah, that's great, Evan. Thank you. So obviously a lot of business experience from a lot of different sectors, to your point, large companies, small companies. So Evan, obviously to your point, the people on this call want to hear us talk about training. That's what we're going to really get into in the ROI. But so you have a lot of different experiences with a lot of different businesses. Let me just kind of get you to talk from a holistic perspective about how important you feel training is to an organization. Can you just share your thoughts and perspective on that?
Well, in my opinion, that's what companies are about, how good they can train. In the book, The Fifth Principle, they talked about the only sustainable advantage a company has is training. The reality is great companies execute well, and you don't execute well without that step of training. And a lot of companies look at training as a nice to have, not a need to have. And I think that is completely wrong. If you want to have a well-run company, everyone has to be on the same page. If you want your brand to mean something, people have to understand what that brand means and how it's to be executed throughout the system. So when I look at training, I look at it as the lifeblood of the system. And because it's the lifeblood of the system, companies really need to focus on how to build great training and how to get everyone to participate and how to get everyone to use it.
Okay. So Evan, just stay on this one for just one more second, then I'll move on here a little bit. But you talk about turnarounds and coming into an organization is obviously not performing where they need to and getting it to the next level. How important was training specifically in those types of scenarios for you?
Well, it's very important. And one part of training I think people don't talk about a lot is cultural training. And so, if you go in particular, if you take this experience I had where the organization was bankrupt, and it wasn't just bankrupt. I mean, the franchisees were just distraught. They were frustrated. They were upset. And a little bit more of the story is that there were 400 company-owned stores that went bankrupt, and the franchisor went bankrupt. And I led the effort in our company to buy the company, and I became president and did the turnaround. And the franchisees just felt like, my goodness, they bought in a system that even the franchisor couldn't run, and they just a feeling of a lack of definition of who we are, why we are, what's our purpose, etc. So the first thing that we really had to do as an organization is go back to the basics and define who we are. So we create a whole process of engagement and listening and going around the country and doing town hall meetings and a lot of advisory councils so we could really understand what made us different, what made us special. And then once we figured that out, we then had to go and we had to create a whole communication plan and a whole training plan so that people got it, so that they understood. And in the simplest terms, what we defined, what made us different than everyone else, were we were really the experts. We were the people that you could trust. That we were the people that if you had an issue or question, that you could believe that we knew what we were talking about. Obviously, training was a big part of delivering that brand promise, but we utilized training to explain that story to people so that when salespeople talked about the company and what made us special, they understood this whole theory of being experts. And what you really need in an organization is everyone in the organization getting, this is what we do. This is what makes us great. And when you don't do that, and everyone has sort of, oh well, we're really good because we buy a lot, or we're really good because we got a lot of product over here, it defeats the purpose. And what I think happens is that mentally, in our brains, we think everyone knows what we think. I mean, just imagine how great it would be if we could actually do that. Oh, we think and instantly everyone knows.
Yeah.
But we can't, and it has to be deliberate. And training, there are lots of different forms of training that can take place to ensure that people get and understand. And I'll just quickly share something very innovative and very different that we did that I think really made a big difference. Is that whenever we started a meeting with our franchisees and with ourselves corporately, we started the meeting with one person sharing the vision of the company in their own words. And everyone was asked to make up like a 1 or 2 minute vision of the company in their own words. And by doing that, you sit back and say, well, is that really training? Well, it caused the people that had to do this, and everyone had to take a turn. Everyone knew that they were going to do it. And most people ended up doing it multiple times. It made them think about what the company is. It made them, we had strategic plans. It made them read the plans. It made them understand it well enough they could do it. And then they kept hearing it from others and getting reinforced. And people had a lot of fun with it. I mean, they made really funny, interesting stories and things of that nature that made it, a fun way to learn. But it really helped us build this incredible culture as an organization. So that's just one, kind of simple example of how you can really take that brand and who you are, what you're doing as a company, and help the organization get and understand what we do.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you for that, Evan. So you talked a lot about obviously building the training and making sure you have a solid foundation. And one of the things, Evan, that came out recently was Training Magazine did a study, and they talked about the top 5 training trends in training for 2015. And two that they mentioned specifically, I think, tied directly to what you're talking about was one of those being aligning training with business goals, not just doing training for the sake of training, but aligning it with business goals and measuring our, ROI, what we're talking about. So Evan, once you guys built all this great training, I know you shared one tip, but how do you get people engaged? How do you get people to utilize it? Because you can have the best training out there, but if people don't take it, the company or the organization just not going to get the results that they're looking for. So can you talk about how you actually get people to utilize the training that's made available?
Okay, you've asked a lot, so you've got to bear with me as I go through this. There are two aspects here that are really important. I'll talk about the ROI first, and then I'll talk about how to get people to train. A lot of times people look at training and say, I don't know how to prove it. I know training works, but I don't know how to prove it. But there are, in fact, metrics that you can look at and that you can literally measure training. So we did an in-depth research with one of our clients, and we looked at locations doing 80% or more completion of training versus locations doing 50% or less. And the growth rate per location was 4%, 80 above, and 1.5% growth for the people that were 50 and below. And this is a business with an average size of about $3 million. So by just simply looking at training completion rates and comparing it to growth rates, you could then look at the dollar value. And remember, that dollar value keeps compounding because that increased growth keeps going with you. So that was one way. Another client of ours, we did a President's Club. We brought in their best salespeople, and we did a special training with that group of people. It was a 3-day event, and we measured the 6-month sales results of that group of people, and they were up an average of 33%. Then we looked at the people that didn't come, and on average they were down 8%. So there was a 41% swing between those that had the training and those that didn't have the training.
Mm-hmm.
When we did a big project, the old company I worked at, we were really looking at installation and how to improve it. We created this training program and reward program called Installation Excellence. Before the program, we went out and we surveyed customers, and we asked them this very simple question: would you buy from us again? And the results were disturbing. And the results were that 13% of people said, we would not buy from you again. I mean, that's a big, big number, eye-opener for everyone. We then created this whole training program, and we and this was very interesting because it was an installation program, but what we really identified was the part of the installation was the behavior of the installers when they were there. Did they vacuum? Did they do a walkthrough with the customer? Were they polite? Did they review the order? That was important. But equally important was what the salesperson said in advance and how the staff followed up. So we looked at the whole chain, and we created training for every aspect of the chain. We looked at process improvement. We put in a checklist, the customer reviewing all the things so they knew in advance what to expect. And we were able to take that 13% and drop it to 1% and eventually get it to 0.5% of the people said they wouldn't buy from us again. So you could just imagine the compounding effect of that, because not only do you retain more customers, but you're going to get a lot more advocates, a lot more people saying great things about the organization.
Mm-hmm.
These statistics are wonderful things to go to management and say, okay, with management, we can prove to you the economic value of training, because you can say, okay, look at what it means to grow at this percent versus this percent, etc. The bigger question, though, is how do you get the support of the trainee? How do you get the support of all the local people? In franchising, there's different ownership, but certainly working with clients of ours where they own the complete chain, there's still a huge disconnect between what the front office wants people to do and what the people actually do.
Mm-hmm.
And part of this process really starts with how you communicate what you're doing and why you're communicating it. In the ideal world, what you want to do with training is you want to understand what people's needs are, what they think their needs are, get support from everyone. You can do surveys of your employees or surveys of your franchisees to understand what their needs are so they were participating in the process. You have to produce really good training. Okay, I mean, that's just a given. Whether it's leader-led, whether it's online, whether it's sales tools, operations manuals, it has to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll tell you, just to tell you a funny story. I was having a conversation a couple days ago with a potential client, and they said to me, we're talking about, love to have you, use Total Training and all this good stuff. And they said, you guys are perfectionists. You guys just do too good at work. We bought our own copy of Captivate. We got our own people. We're creating the training. And I said, how good is the training? He goes, you know what? It's not that good. It's really PowerPoint, a little audio, some quizzing, but it covers the salient points. And I said, great. And I said, what are the training problems you have? And he goes, without hesitation, he says, no one's using it. And I'm like, maybe it's because it's boring as death.
Yeah.
And no one likes going, and it's like you're twisting your arm. But A, it has to be good. And secondly, you can't just say to people, "Oh, there's e-learning, go take your e-learning," or "There's a course, go to take this live course." So ideally, you want to start with really understanding the needs of people, getting people involved, so that when you're producing training that's really needed, and you're not just producing training that somebody thinks you need. And that's really important. So you got relevant training, really well done training. You need to convince people of the why and what's in it for them. So it's not like, oh, we have training, you have to take training now. Everyone must take training by this time period. People don't like to be told what to do, and people are really busy.
Yeah.
But if you say to somebody, if you take this training, this is what it's going to do for you. It's going to make it easier for you to do this. It will help you close more sales so you'll be more successful and earn more money. So a training department needs to be a marketing department. They need to think about everything they're doing and saying, how do I market this to people? How do I present this in an incredibly positive way? And then the next part of it is to create bite-sized pieces. You know the old joke, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So, depending on what you're doing, if it's a new hire, you want to have a really intensive training period because they're a new hire, and you typically speaking are creating a curriculum for them and stages, and some of it might be e-learning, some of it might be following someone, mentoring, all of those things. Those people are generally easier to get to train because they get it immediately. Hey, I don't know this stuff. I need to know it. But the people that are there every day, been there for years, old timers, know everything, they're a little bit more difficult. So you want to look at and say to people, let's just do a module a week. This is the module a week, and everyone's going to commit to doing this module a week. If you have some types of discussion boards, you can have discussions on the modules. You can make sure that managers are making sure that people are doing it. And then you want to kind of also look at how do you make this fun. So maybe there's some small prize for the first person that completed the module of the week. Or you highlight the 10 best scores on the test or something of that nature, so that you're creating a fun awareness of the fact that people are doing training, and you can make it fun. And anything around training, there are ways to look at ways to make it fun. And you want to reinforce the people that are doing great, not pick on the people doing poorly. And I think this is
Mm-hmm.
very important, okay? If you just always say, Cordell, you didn't do your training, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, it's not going to go well. But when you highlight the people that did, Cordell, I want to thank you. You were the first person this week to get the training. You scored 100 on the training. It's fantastic. Really appreciate that. Maybe someone higher up in the organization every now and then sends an email saying, hey, I know every week you've been doing the training. Get the positive reinforcement in there. And then the other thing I want to add, and I think this is very important, is in the appraisal process, there should be a training plan for each employee. And it's not a statement that the employee has done a bad thing. And, at Engage in Total, we do this. I mean, so this is no surprise to you, is when you do the review, it's about personal development. And it's not that they did a bad job, but everybody should be looking to be a lifelong learner. So it may be that we sit there and say, in the conversation, this would be a really great book. Let's read this book and we can talk about it. Or here's some courses that we'd love to have you take. Or here's a seminar we think you should go to. But every employee should have an individual training program. And what will happen if you do these things is you'll build this culture of training, which will greatly increase usage of training throughout the system.
Well, having a lot of great points, a lot of great points. So a lot of great takeaways, make training fun, make it engagement. It has to be good training. I couldn't agree with all of those things more. One of the things I guess I've seen a lot of people as they really thought about putting training in place inside the organization, they've really focused on the need, the people, the technology, if it's going to be technology. And those are all great components. But I've probably not heard a lot of people talk about the communication plan that you talked about and touched on. Do you see that moving, Evan? Certainly you spend a lot of time talking about it, but do you think more people are starting to focus on that and recognize the importance of not just the training plan, but how are we going to communicate it? Do you see that moving or shifting?
Cordell, I would love to tell you I do. I don't. I talk to people all the time, and constantly I hear, we aren't getting the usage we like. We're not getting the usage we like. Occasionally I'll hear, there's a new compliance issue going on. I have a client in the pharmaceutical industry, and there's recertification that people have to do. So that goes well because there's a big reason why. But most training departments just don't think in a marketing way,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a big mistake. And they tend to, and I'm not saying this is right because I think it's wrong, is they tend not to have a person that's quote at the big table. So people tend in the organization to devalue training, and sometimes the people in the training department aren't willing to stick up their hand and say, hey, stuff is really important to the organization. Um, so, that people, oh, well, you just did this ROI on training, but what you didn't factor in was this or that, and maybe those things were the things that really made the difference. And I think it's important if you're running a training department, to try to look for those ROI things, because those things can be very, 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 very compelling. And to building that marketing plan and thinking of yourself as a marketing organization. No different than you want, I think, every employee to think of themselves as trainers and being in training and things of that nature. If you're a manager of any kind, you are a trainer. You are a coach.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll bring this up, and I think this is an important point too. Companies tend to train on things that are very specific to their organization. So they'll do tons of product training on, here are our products, here are the things that we need. If they're a restaurant, it might be specifically, on this is how you cook this dish, or specific things of the skill set of how to be a waiter or waitress, or, all of these, quote, skills that are required for doing the job itself. So if you're a salesperson, that might be how do you approach customers, or how do you close or overcome objections. What people don't do is they don't do a lot of training on business skills.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't train people on how to interview to hire, how to do performance appraisals, how to deal with conflict when there are problems, how to manage people of different generations. They don't do the soft skills to help managers be better managers.
Yeah.
And these are things that companies need, and they're not hard. And the other thing is, when you read and you study about organizations, a lot of times what you hear is that people leave because they don't feel they're growing, or they can't do their job, or they don't know how to do their job. And when you provide these soft skill kinds of training, then what happens is your managers feel like they're growing. They do a better job hiring. So, hiring mistakes are hugely expensive. So helping someone be a better interviewer and understanding the hiring process is huge. The performance review process is very important. People tend to avoid it, or they tend to do it quickly, and they just, 1 to 5 this, 1 to 5 that, etc. And it is a coaching opportunity.
Yeah.
And training people on how to be a coach, how to get feedback, how to help somebody when they need help is really important. And a lot of times managers just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that those are really important skills.
Wow. Great points, Evan. Lots of great points there. So, Evan, as you know, I mean, we have a pretty big audience out here of all training professionals, people that run a lot of different types of organizations. Some people may be looking to enhance their training program and get it to the next level, to get more management buy-in, to get more user adoption. Some people may be completely new to this and they're getting ready to start their training program off. So I know we've talked about, a lot of things, but if you kind of had to boil these down and try to give some key tips to really make sure our audience focuses on to really enhance their training ROI, what are some tips that you can kind of boil all of these things down to?
Okay. Training department needs a business plan, no differently than any other part of the business. And not only do you need a business plan, but you need the support of people in the organization. So if I was running a training department, what I would be doing is I would be talking to all the other departments. And I would say, look, we're working on our business plan for the year. We want to know your needs. What are the things that you guys need? What are the areas we could help you with? By the way, what are the things you really like that we're doing we need to do more? And what are the things we're doing maybe we're not doing so well we could do better? And
Hmm.
if you go in and you get people to tell you what their needs are, and then you come back to them and say, you know what, I've heard what you said about needs. This is how we can help you solve some of these problems. And here are sort of the cost implications of how to do it. And maybe this is the deluxe version. It costs this much. And here's a less expensive version, maybe not as good. But which of these do you think makes sense? And get this buy-in from people. And this should be done well in advance of the completion of the budget.
Okay.
Right? So you don't want to run a training department out there and then everyone's budgeted Zippo for training, and then you go to people, now we need money. Okay, where does that money come from? And we got to go to the board to get more money, or how do we get more money? So if you understand your corporate training process, so at the company that I used to work for, CCA Global Partners, fantastic company, we had 24 people in the training department, and we looked at the 15 different divisions of CCA Global Partners, each one of those like they were customers. Even though they weren't customers, we all worked together. So we would go to the presidents of those divisions, and we would say to everybody, what do you guys need? What are the things that are important to you? And then we not only did we do that for those brands, but then we would also go to people within the organization and say, what kind of team building do we need to do internally? What kind of skills do we need to teach people? What do we need to focus on? And it's always a mistake to do too much,
Yeah.
and it's certainly a mistake to do nothing.
Yeah.
But to build that consensus of what people need while they're building their budgets so that they can budget for those things. And if you can show them ROI at the same time, then they can sit back and say, okay, I get it. I get it. I can understand how if I budget this, this is going to make it more likely I can grow sales, build sales, etc. And I think that's very helpful. And if a training department is going in and trying to tell people what they should do versus the partnership of what are your needs and doing that need assessment, then your training department, you're a log jam, and it's going to be difficult. And people should look at training not as an expense but as an investment. And it's always interesting to me because I always hear the same thing: is when things are tough, the first thing they do is get rid of the training department.
Yeah.
And things are tough, there's nothing more important than the training department. Because when you have fewer customers, that closing rate of each customer is the most important statistic that you have. Because if you can change your closing rate from 40% to 60%, you've increased your business by 50. So even if you lose 30% of your customers, you're still going to do more business because you made that improvement. And people need to understand that. And I guess as I'm going on here, you also have to understand those key numbers. What are those key things that training can impact? And say, okay, look, if our close rate is this, if we could move it to this, what does that work to the company? If our average ticket is this and we can move it to this, what does that work to the company? If our retention rate is this and we can improve our retention rate to that, what does it work to the company? And if you start looking at this, and I'll just use an example here, if we're going to change the retention rate from 85% to 90%, okay, and we're a $100 million company, what is that? Quick math here is about a $5 million opportunity. I got that right? Yeah, it's a $5 million opportunity.
That sounds right.
I'm doing it off the top of my head. So if you can change the retention rate of customers by 5 percentage points up, it's worth $5 million in sales. Well, what is that worth in terms of training the people that interact with those customers? And to look at those key metrics, even if you don't have the information as to what the ROI is, if you understand the key performance indicators of the company, and then look at which ones you can affect and impact, and you can make a case and say, look, I think we can change these numbers.
Yeah.
And what would that mean? What would that mean?
Yeah. Great points, Evan. So the plan, make sure you focus on certain KPIs that the training is really going to target, and also the communication piece that we talked about as part of this as well. So making sure that you got that well thought out plan is kind of some of the key things I heard from that. Yeah?
Exactly.
Good deal, good deal. Evan, thank you so much. Lots of great insight as it relates to training, and I'm sure that is going to be helpful for our audiences out there. Evan, I think as part of this, you actually had an offer that you wanted to make available to our audience. Can I turn that over to you to share that with our audience as well?
Sure. Um, Total training. Our company is going to make you two offers. One offer is going to be only for the first 50 people because it takes a lot of time. And the second offer is for absolutely everyone. So let me start with the absolutely for everyone. We have a complete set of what we call out-of-the-box training on human resources. So we have the interview, we have the appraisal program, we have coaching, how to manage conflict, we have succession planning on how to help your employees grow, and we also have managing different generations. So everybody that's on the call for you, we're going to give you 90 days for you personally to go through and take that training and take the benefit of that training. So on the screen, you're going to see a URL for this specific offer. If you go in there, you're going to be able to register and have 90 days access to all of this great free training, and it will help you as a person grow. You will be personally a better manager. So that is our first offer or gift to all of you. The second one, which is only to the first 50 people that respond, and that is our engagement team, and we have a great engagement team of people at Tortal, will give you a complete review of your training department, and we will talk to you about your issues and try to understand what's going on in your business, and there'll be no obligation whatsoever to purchase anything from Tortal. It'll be your time with our engagement people that can look at what you're doing, and we will give you tips and ideas on how to make your training department better with zero obligation. This is not going to be a sales pitch for an hour. This is going to be us listening to you and giving you ideas of what you can do to improve your business that don't involve particularly us. And now we're only going to do that for the first 50 people because that's going to take us probably between a half hour and an hour with everyone that we do, and consequently we would get swamped. But if you move fast, you can be one of the 50, and everyone, of course, can take advantage of the management online training. So I think these are pretty good gifts that we want to give to everyone on the program, and I hope everyone takes advantage.
Good deal, Evan. Thank you for those. Those are very generous offers. So I certainly hope that our audience will take us up on that and take those couple of offers. So, Evan, again, thank you for doing this. This was very insightful, and I'm sure many people got great information from it. So thank you again for your time. Also, thank you, our audience, for joining us on this session. I would certainly encourage you to please come back and partake in the other webinars that we're going to be offering as well. I would also like to make note that if you like this series and you actually want to have these available for a nominal price, we're actually going to make all of these downloads available, and you can actually have these recordings. So you'll be able to find that information on our website as well. So thank you for your attendance, and we will see you later. Have a good day. Bye.